I'm Nancy Amadeo, the Commission Chair, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's meeting of Thursday, September 8th, and I will call this meeting to order. Can we have a roll call, please, to establish a quorum?
Chair Amadeo.
Here.
Vice Chair McCarthy.
Here.
Commissioner Herr. Commissioner Herr, I don't see. Commissioner Rana.
Here.
Commissioner St. John. Commissioner St. John.
We can't hear you. You're muted. Commissioner St. John, you appear to be muted.
Oh, Commissioner Herr is in the waiting area. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me promote her.
Commissioner St. John, you want to try again? Because I'm not showing you muted here. You must be muted at home.
Well, let's acknowledge Commissioner Herr while Commissioner St. John. Commissioner Herr, do you want to acknowledge as being present?
Yes.
All right, sounds good. And Commissioner Walton.
I'm here.
And let me just make sure Commissioner Woodson is not in the waiting
No,
area.
he's showing on the screen.
Okay,
I'm
Commissioner
right
Woodson.
next to you.
Okay,
I'm literally sitting next to you on the video. So
all right, sounds good. So you have,
Thank you very much.
but I do want to acknowledge Commissioner St. John.
Yes, Commissioner St. John, would you just say hello so we can tell if your mic is working? No, the mic is not working. When I've had this problem before, I have logged off and logged back on, and that has worked for me. It doesn't always work, but it has worked for me. So Commissioner St. John, would you like to log off and then log back on to the meeting? It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does.
So, Madam Chair, you do have a quorum.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to moment of silence and Pledge of Allegiance. Can I have a volunteer to do the Pledge of Allegiance? You can just raise your hand and, okay. Commissioner Rana, you raised your hand.
Yes.
Okay. So if you, a moment of silence first, and then if you can lead us in the pledge.
Okay. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to the consent agenda. Oh, no, excuse me, special announcements and communications from the floor. So we will go to attendees first. If you wish to speak on something not on the agenda, now would be the appropriate time. Please raise your virtual hand to be recognized. And I see no hands, so I will move on to commissioners. And do any commissioners have any announcements or any items they wish to share with the public at this time? And again, you can raise your virtual hand. And I do not see anybody. I have one announcement. This Saturday is the Marina Foundation's Man and Woman of the Year. This time there are 3 honorees instead of 2. Man of the Year is the late Terry Segrist. I'm honored to have been asked to be the Woman of the Year. And then there is a Lifetime of Service Award being given to Lenore Masterson, who Lifetime of Service really is the appropriate recognition. And she has been Woman of the Year in the past, but she certainly has a lifetime of service to this community. So if no one else has anything they would like to add, we will move on and go to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is items that are considered not to be of debate or and can be approved in a single vote. We only have one item. If there is any discussion, we can do that now. Otherwise, I will accept a motion to approve. Would someone please make the motion then? I don't see any hands raised. This is for the minutes of
Motion.
August 25th. The motion was made by Glenn Woodson, correct? And do I have a second? And second by Serinda Rana. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? No one is opposed, so we will move on. That passed at 7-0. I believe we have 7 present. So we will move on to a public hearing.
So, Madam Chair, just for fairness, because we do have 2 meaty topics for today, and Commissioner St. John is on the call, but I can't hear him vote stuff, so I'm struggling
so-
with that. So I feel like he should try to log back in and log back on, and if we want to give him a call, because we do want full input from everybody, right?
Right.
So
Right. Okay. So, Commissioner St. John, if you would try again to log off and log back on. And make sure that your computer is not muted.
and then he can even call into the meeting.
Yeah, you could call in on your phone.
We just want to have a full complement.
And you can call in on your phone, but still be available on the screen. Is that correct, Guido? So that he can see the action?
That is correct. It's just that, the public has a right to know how
Right.
people are voting, and, somebody could give a thumbs up, but that's not we need to hear.
And I actually should have done a roll call
Yeah.
vote because we are meeting virtually. And
So I defer to you as the chair if you want to take a break or keep
yeah,
going.
let's do a short break. Is 3 minutes enough?
Sure.
Okay, so we'll take a 3-minute break so that Commissioner St. John can either phone in for the meeting or can try logging back on again.
Yeah, and I'm gonna email him my city cell phone number if he is having trouble or just.
Okay.
Yeah. But thank you, Chair.
Okay,
Let's see.
so we will start again at 6:41.
Sure.
I just wanted to quickly let everyone know that I am also experiencing some internet problems. Right now, it seems like I at least have my phone on data, but if things change, then I may have to call in as well.
Just give us some sort of a signal that you are going to log off so that we can pause the meeting.
And if hopefully just a moment ago, I don't know if you saw that I logged out and then I came back. It's because my Wi-Fi went down or my internet went down. Yeah. So hopefully we've got this, but just if not, I will do my very, very best. I promise.
Okay.
Okay.
And is your hand, oh, there you go. Mm.
Chair Amadeo, so I just called Commissioner St. John. He's trying to call in right now. So,
Yeah, I saw him talking to you.
So
And I should see a phone number come up once he has connected. So I am, oh, wait a second. He might be in attendees now. No. Oh, yes, one number. So if you can put the phone number up to panelist.
Okay.
Ah, there we go. So Commissioner St. John, is that you on the telephone?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, wonderful. So why don't we go back to the public meeting and we'll take the vote again. And this time we'll do a verbal roll call for the consent agenda.
Great.
Okay.
So we'll do the roll call. So the motion on the floor is
Excuse me, it says recording
Oh.
is paused.
The AMP is recording. That's
Okay.
just recording from me. So
Okay.
I stopped recording a couple months ago because AMP does such a good job. So
Oh, okay, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
so the motion on the floor before we actually I defer to you, Chair, if you want to read.
Okay, the motion to approve the Planning Commission action minutes of August 25th, if we can have a roll call vote.
The roll call is Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCarthy,
Yes.
Commissioner Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodson, Commissioner Woodson, Commissioner Herr,
Yes.
and Commissioner St. John.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. Now we will move on to the public hearing. We will open a public hearing, take public testimony, and consider adopting a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Marina, approving a tree removal permit and recommending the City Council determine that the proposed tentative map amendment is consistent with the certified EIR and adopted University Villages plan, and approve an amendment to the tentative subdivision originally approved in 2005, subject to conditions presented by the contract planner, Steve Flint. So Steve, welcome. And
Let me unmute.
there you go.
Good evening, Chair Amadeo and members of the commission. My name is Steve Flint. I work for RGS, who in turn works for the city. And I am happy to take you through this presentation. I'm going to hit share screen and hope it works. There we go. Get rid of this. There we go. Okay.
So we have nothing showing up on our screen.
Oh,
I can pull it up, Steve.
it's telling me I am screen sharing. Guido,
And it
can
says it's sharing as well, but we're not seeing anything.
okay. I don't know if Guido, are you preempting me?
Nope.
Okay.
Let me try to pull it up for you, Steve, okay?
Okay.
1 second. I have access to the city server. So I have this one. Let me make sure this is the right one.
I don't know why it's not sharing.
One second. It's a pretty large file. Here we go. All right, there you go, Steve.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So as you said, this is a request for amendment to previously approved tentative map and request for tree removal and replacement in phase 2 and phase 3 of the Marina, used to be Marina Villages, is now known as the Dunes on Monterey Bay. I guess I'm gonna have to rely on Guido to change pages for me.
Yeah, you can just say next slide, Steve.
Okay, next slide. Little background, this project was approved and the EIR was certified back in 2005. Please advance. In 2020, the council approved a resolution that approved a tentative map and determined that the changes were not substantial, did not involve any new significant effects, and in all ways was in keeping with the certified final environmental impact report. Okay. The project is broken out into phases. This map shows you essentially phases 1 through 3 and the opportunity areas around it. We're talking about phase 2 west, which I think if you move to the next one, is identified here as University Village Residential, and that is planning area C. And the other part, which is phase 3, the tentative map for phase 3 encompasses planning areas E through I. Okay, next. This is an exhibit of the map that was approved in 2020. And you can see that at that time it delineated about 88 residential lots. Next. This represents the amendment or the change to the subdivision, which essentially is still consistent with what the specific plan called for and is consistent with the previously approved subdivision. It did reduce the lots by 20. And if you look in the upper northernmost corner of the project area, you'll see parcel OS 212, which is an open space area now. It used to have lots in the original subdivision. It has now been converted to open space, mainly because access across that easement, it's a 10-inch gas line. So access was kind of difficult to attain, and it was redesigned to respect that. Okay, next. So again, this kind of shows you the difference. You can see that the main changes are up in the northern portion of the subdivision, but for the most part, it's essentially the same. Lot sizes are somewhat diminished. Lot numbers have been reduced, but there is more open space now. Okay. Phase 3, when it was originally approved in 2020, created one large lot, which is lot 20 in this exhibit. Next. This is the proposed tentative map for that area, creating 255 residential lots and about 2.5 acres of open space, which includes one parcel that is referred to in the specific plan as Butterfly Park and other areas of open space. And one of the big features within this area is the linear park that runs north-south, and that will come into play in a bit. Okay, next. So that is a recap of the subdivisions and the amendments to that. The next part of this request is the tree replacement. And that is essentially, this is a stated goal of the specific plan, is to avoid as many tree removals as possible and protect the trees that are there. All trees are required to be inventoried by a licensed forester. Reports for these various phases. I think you can move on, Guido.
Sorry, my computer froze for a bit.
It's okay. So Denise Duffy and Associates prepared these reports. One was for phases 2 and 3 in 2019. Further inventories were conducted in 2020. The most recent one was for the southerly portion in the phase 3 area. There was also a supplemental arborist report done in July of this year, which proposed some preservation and transplanting, which was over and above what had previously been done. Okay. So I'm not going to get into a lot of detail on which trees remain and which trees removed. This exhibit does show you that there was about 48 trees that were identified. This area had been pretty much impacted before they moved in for the proposed tree removal. So at this point, there were 39 trees that were determined to be in fair condition or good condition and are healthy enough to be replaced. So at a 2-to-1 ratio, which is what the specific plan calls for and the general plan, that would entail 78 new trees. The minimum size is 15 gallon, and there's a requirement for 24-inch box specimens at prime intersections or key areas that are visually prominent. And that'll be determined as the development goes on. Next. So the August 30th report covered a larger area. The area in phase 3 is substantially, has quite a few more trees. 726 trees were inventoried, and of those trees, 327 were deemed healthy and are proposed for removal. And so at a rate of 2-to-1, that means there would be 654 replacement trees for mitigation. Next. So in March of 22, it came to the city's attention that a row of cypress trees shown here that are basically clouded in red were removed as part of the work of taking out a water pipe that MCWD needed to remove. And there was no permit pulled to do this work. A number of people were a little bit upset by that and came to the city and filed a complaint. I can go to the next one. So in response, a number of meetings were held. The applicant held a meeting at their offices, attended by citizens and city staff. Their representatives extended apologies for removing the trees, pledged to work closely with the city and to avoid similar incidents. Next. And further agreed to retain an additional 24 trees which had not previously been identified. One of the things that they wanted to do is go back and identify trees that, with some modifications to the site improvements, they would be able to spare the trees. There was a special meeting that City Council conducted on May 10th. And then there was an additional community meeting on the 21st at MCP. Then a site tour was conducted on June 1st where concerned citizens were invited to walk the site and actually take a look at these trees and see what the opportunities would be. So next. And then Denise Duffy did another inventory back up in the phase 2 west area and identified a row of trees essentially that follow First Street that could be retained, and then also identified a number of new growth saplings, small trees that could be salvaged and transplanted. And the proposal that MCP made was that they would create a temporary nursery to be located behind the Century 21 building, where these types of trees, the saplings, would be held and maintained, watered, and taken care of until they could be transplanted into an area that would be developed. So next slide, please. So the proposal, and this is essentially the row along First that we're talking about. This would be retained. The grading would be modified slightly so that they would not be damaged in any way. And then it would retain or relocate more than 50 saplings and smaller trees that have a good chance of survival. So that's essentially their proposal. Next. So essentially they would take the 50 trees and split them. 26 would go to phase 2 west, 24 would go down to the phase 3 area. And then, again, we talked about the nursery where they would be maintaining these trees until they're ready to plant. Okay, next. So the proposed modifications were to retain those 8 healthy trees that were originally going to be removed, which reduced the total number of trees from 78 to 62. And at 2-to-1 also reduced the number of replacement trees required. The math is getting a little funny at this point. Okay, next. I do have a total breakdown though for you. And again, 7 additional trees that were supposed to be removed are going to be retained at a 2-to-1 ratio. 640 trees will be replaced, which was down from the 654 originally. Next. So for the trees that were removed without the permit, city code requires a 3-to-1 ratio for those trees, on top of the standard 2-to-1 replacement ratio. So at a 6-to-1 ratio, 41 more trees will be required to compensate for those that were removed without a permit. Next. So if we look at our math here, in phase 3, we're talking about, I'm sorry, it says phase 3, it's really phase 2 west. We're talking about a total of 88 trees to be added and retained. Next. In phase 3, we're talking about 706 trees total, which includes those, the compensating trees for the removal without permit, the 640 trees at a 2-to-1 ratio that are healthy but have to be removed, for a total of 706. Next. Oh, you know what? This was the older version. Peer review, and that's why Frank Ono is here tonight if you have questions for him, did a visual inspection of over 750 trees. And essentially is in agreement with the findings and conclusions that Denise Duffy and Associates made in their arborist report. Okay, so next. So one of the things, we had a slide, the slideshow that I had put up that I couldn't show you had a statement in there about the fact that, give me a second here, where are my notes?
Yeah, I can speak to this, Steve.
Okay.
So we met with the applicant today. As everybody knows, this project's been going on for, almost 2 decades. There were some conditions of approval that we had to clean up a little bit. So I did send to the commission the conditions that if you do choose to approve tonight, you would be going off of. And for transparency, we did put it on the city website. And so those are the conditions that you should be going off of. So that's the slide that we wanted to.
That's the slide that I had. There is a link. I had a link on there. I will send this slideshow to Guido, so he has it for his records. But essentially, we're talking about adopting a resolution for the tree removal and replacement for phase 2 west. For a total of 62 new specimens and 26 transplanted. Next. And adopting or approving tree removal and replacement for phase 3, essentially totaling 706 healthy trees. And recommending to the city council, next slide, that they find that the project is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA guideline section 15183, and adopt a resolution approving tentative map amendments for phase 2 west and phase 3, subject to the findings and conditions as modified and so that essentially is it. I think the next statement is, next slide. Yes, any questions?
Okay.
And then Chair Amadeo, the only thing I wanted to add to the presentation is the applicant is claiming SB 330 protections. And so we just wanted to remind the commission of that. And because of that, and because there's already been a community meeting and there's already been a study session, this is now the 3rd meeting. And so we need to budget for at least 2 city council meetings.
Right.
So whatever the commission decides tonight, either a recommendation to the council for denial or recommendation for approval, whatever happens at the end of today, we have to kick it up to council. And if the commission cannot make a recommendation, then maybe the motion is to carry it forward with some inputs or whatever we want to call it. But at the end of this meeting, we do have to give some type of recommendation to the council.
So can we, if we can't come up with a motion, which would be very disappointing, quite frankly, but if we couldn't come up with a motion that could pass, can we forward it to the city council, letting them know we have no recommendation to approve or disapprove?
That's
Keeping it neutral.
That's fine. Hopefully we don't have to get there, but yes. we
Yeah,
have
but
to
it's just, if we got there, I want to know what we're allowed to do. Okay. Okay, so commissioners, do you have questions at this point of either the presenter, Flint, and I don't see you on the screen, so I don't have your last name now, or from Mr. Ono regarding the tree removal? No questions? Oh, now we have questions. Okay, so let's start with Glenn Woodson, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Amadeo. Actually, didn't really have a lot of questions, but I do now. I just would like to know from the petitioner why they are claiming these protections at this specific time when they have not to date. Just curious. Thank you. That's my question right now.
Okay, and after, maybe should we promote, or should we have that answered by Don Hofer or by Doug Young? Or
Sure.
by-
Usually, Madam Chair, we give the applicant an opportunity, 10 minutes to give their.
Okay, so we can wait till then and they can answer the question at that time?
Yeah.
Okay, so Glenn, did you have any other questions?
No, not at this time. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, so Vice Chair McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair Amadeo. Two quick questions. I'll ask them both in the interest of time. But the first one is, would staff say that if there was any condition that is maybe more contentious, that it would only be the tree issue? Was there any of the other conditions require a lot of back and forth with the applicant? Was staff concerned about, for example, the water and sanitary sewer, the stormwater? Did any of those create any, I guess, raise any eyebrows with staff where it required a little bit of work, or was it mostly the tree issue?
No, none of them were red flags. If they were, we would alert the commission to that. I mean, we had a discussion, and really it was really technical cleanup stuff yeah.
Okay, thank you. And second question, I know that Mike Owen, who was on our tree committee, was informed. Have you received any written correspondence or feedback from him?
We have, and he actually is on the call, so I don't.
Okay, I'll wait for that. I just wanted to know if there was any correspondence. Those are my only questions. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other commissioners with questions? Commissioner Woodson, you still have your hand up. So do you have another question now or? Okay, thank you. So if there are no other questions from commissioners, I'm going to open the public hearing, and we can allow for the public to participate. So members of the public, if you wish to comment on this issue, please raise your hand. And I see we have Mike Owen. So Mike, you are recognized and have 4 minutes. Oops.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. First of all, I got to apologize. I've been out of town for the last 5 days, just got back an hour ago. So I really haven't been able to look at a specific detail, but I support the resolution for a number of reasons. And like a few of them is that I hope this can be an example going forward for the city development of the Dune Park, for Cypress Knolls. I think the developer has really evolved tremendously as far as the consideration of trees in the planning process, and not as just sort of an afterthought at the very end. My only objection is sort of on the linear park. There is one building, about 3 buildings from 3rd Street going north, and it's the only one with the little tower on top of the house. And there's 2 cypress trees, which one of them has really nice canopy. They're in a linear park. They're not in the way of development, but they are so ill-formed, so ugly. The branches have been so trimmed at the bottom. It's basically a hedgehog. I think it's a danger. Nobody could ever wrap their arms around the tree because they're going to get punctured. So just because of practical common sense, even though these trees are in a linear park, I wish the arborist would really look at it carefully, because I think they're ill-formed, ugly, unaesthetic, and actually should be removed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Owen. And I did forget to allow, and so we'll do this first, allow the applicant to have the 10 minutes now. And I'm not going to say exactly 10 minutes, but if you can keep your comments close to that, that would be appreciated. So, Mr. Yount, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair Amadeo, and welcome, commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to present this information and the opportunity to move a very important part of the project forward for consideration and approval. The Phase 3 tentative map, the Phase 2 West portions are an important part, a key component of the project, and we do appreciate the opportunity. And as Mr. Owen had mentioned, we have learned and evolved as we go forward, and definitely appreciate the community's input in building this project, making a better project. So let me go forward with and share my screen, if I might now, with a brief presentation, a number of slides, which I think will help illustrate this component of the project as well. Okay, is the screen
Yes.
showing now?
Yes.
Okay. And so moving just quickly, then we'll talk a little bit of some background. Phase 2 West tentative map amendment, Phase 3 tentative map amendment, the Phase 2 West tree permit amendment, and Phase 3 permit. Just one again, I'm Doug Yount with Shea Homes, Marina Community Partners. Also on the line with us is Don Hofer. He'll be joining in the presentation as well. With some of the details. Don is our Senior Vice President for Community Development for Shea Homes, Northern California. A little bit of background. So you'll see the oversaw that Steve had presented, that there's Phase 3 includes the areas with the lines here. It includes the Phase 3 residential, the Phase 3 office, but it also includes a portion up to the corner. We're not talking about that tonight. Only these 2 portions down here. The development agreement and disposition development agreement did allow for a variety of phases to be taken down at different stages, and that's what's reflected here. Also, Phase 2 West, as you know, Phase 2 East over here is being constructed as we speak out there. So the Phase 2 West tentative amendment, there was a comparison shown earlier by Mr. Flint, and as you can see, the map that was approved in 2020 and the current amended tentative map that is before you, just some general significant points regarding the changes that have been made. One is that the new tentative map expands the open space adjacent to First Avenue so that it really expands this open space area. It does create an opportunity for pedestrian in that little open space sign that goes in. It also reduces the lots from 88 to 68, as you heard earlier from the original submittal at 88 to now 68. It expands open space along 9th Street with an additional park area up here. Even the linear park is expanded somewhat from previous discussion. You also have eliminate A Street access to First Avenue. So A Street comes here. The previous map, there was sort of a cut through that went through. I think better neighborhood planning, better community planning allows for this to be more of an interior neighborhood street. And again, that does allow preservation of additional open space here. So those are the primary areas in Phase 2 West tentative map amendment that different than what was approved in 2020. So Don, I didn't know if you wanted to add.
Yeah, Doug, I would also point out here that, you know, the triangular open space part in the north there, you know, originally in the map, you can see on the left that the lotting extended into that area. And the big issue, and Steve Flint recognized this a little bit earlier, there is a gas line that you can see in the exhibit on the right there that kind of runs from east to west. And it was determined after the tentative map was approved in May of 2020 that relocation of that gas line was not feasible with PG&E. And so at one point we had created sort of a park area on top of it with housing on either side. So there was housing on that northern little triangular piece. But then it was determined in working with staff that it was a little bit of an island up there, and that it was maybe best just to dedicate all that to open space. And so the beauty of this plan really is that we've created a considerable amount more open space in this area of the development than what was previous. And I think it, you know, will be a very nice neighborhood as proposed.
Thank you, Don.
Yeah.
Next then is the Phase 3 tentative map amendment, and just some summary of the acreages that are included. It's 76.5 total acres throughout both, again, the residential as well as the office area, which is in here. So this is the county supervisor's county office down here. This is a future city park. This is the affordable housing site that's currently under construction here. But the subject of this tentative map is what's essentially in between. It's about 4.57 acres of park and open space, 20 acres or more of street right-of-way, which does include this linear park, 26 acres residential, and 26.87 acres of office park. Let me clarify that this 20 acres is of street. The 4.57 acres does include the linear park. Then on the site plan, looking at the residential component, again, about 26.41 acres, 255 residential lots of various forms throughout here of product. And again, 4.57 acres of parks and open space, which does include the linear park. It does include this butterfly park here. It does include these sort of pocket parks that are throughout the specific area here than the tentative map here. You can see a comparison than what was originally submitted in September of last year. It's been almost a year now, September of 2021, that and what was proposed here, and then ultimately what was the result of a lot of discussion back and forth with city staff and consultants and engineers and architects and so forth to really improve and refine the map, as noted by Steve Flynn, is consistent with a specific plan and general plan. It's just a better design, for lack of a better term. Here's some of the primary changes made here, again, per staff request to make this a better community. One is the retention of that butterfly park, which is consistent with a specific plan. Two is the addition of the U-shaped street around the butterfly park, this sort of U-shaped street, and open space area on 5th Street, K Street, 5th and 5th here, K here, streets of around it as well. So you get a little bit better dimension, a little bit better operation of streets, a little more community friendly, neighborhood friendly, creates a little more open space and really expansion of open space areas. So again, an improvement from what was on the left to what's now today on the right. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything.
You know, we can answer, you know, questions if you have them. One of the big considerations in designing this area of the project is that from an infrastructure perspective, all of the sanitary sewer from CSUMB from the university actually runs through this portion of the project. And the project will be replacing that sanitary sewer line, working with the university and MCWD, Marina Coast Water District. And so that original straight through street that you see on the left that kind of bisects the entire project is where that sewer line would be. And that was why that was designed that way to start with. But the revisions that we've made to the plan, which really do a lot more for the community and for a sense of neighborhood, help to, keep the infrastructure we need in place. That's why you see that little park area right there where Doug's pointing right in the entrance. And then, so that sewer line will actually go through that park. And that's an important aspect, is to be able to facilitate the infrastructure needs, but also, come up with a nice land plan that will be a great place for families and people to live in the future. So we thought that might be an important piece for folks to understand.
All right, and then moving on, there's the second part of the tentative map amendment. It's more generalized. It's the office. It's known on the land use plan as OP3, OP4, as you saw on the original slides of Mr. Flynn and ourselves on this presentation as well. It's about 26.87 acres. There's just general large parcels now. There's no site plan yet, so we don't know the specifics. And we are in negotiations, though, with a major medical user for actually 10 acres, primarily in this area. And we are actually negotiating a purchase and sale agreement with a major medical user for 80 to 100,000 square feet of medical offices in this area. So it is something we're very excited about. But tonight, this is really more generalized and more specific to the residential. Relative to the phase 2 west tree permit amendment, these are some of the numbers that Steve had talked about. What's important in this slide, and you've got all of the various tree slides that show exactly what trees are in, what trees are out, what are saved, what are transplanted. We just wanted to give a quick summary of this so that it's kind of easy to have some numbers on the page. You can see in phase 2 west here, 2nd Avenue on the right, 1st Avenue over here on the left, that in the green dots here, there's the 8 that are saved along those large trees along 1st Avenue. But then there's also 28 transplanted trees in the blue that would be transplanted then into this nursery area. In fact, there's almost that many now, maybe a little bit more as today. And of course, closer to a total of some 50 or more that will be in this nursery area to be transplanted back into the tentative map areas, or possibly into the promenade as well, but overall into the tentative map areas. So the amended tree permit, again, for phase 2 west, because there is a tree permit that currently exists, but the amendment to it would be to remove the 31 trees that are there. Required mitigation is 62. Planned replacement and by planned replacement, this is what we're estimating based on averages that have been used in phase 1C, phase 2 east, other parts of the project. We've been replacing or planting trees, if you will, at about a 4.8 to 1 ratio versus a 2 to 1 ratio. So a much higher ratio of new trees being planted. So estimated if you just use the 4.8 average, you get about 298 trees. To get to that level, those would obviously be the 7 or the 8 saved in place. Sorry, that should say 8 here. The transplanted trees then those would also come back in, and then the new plantings, estimating approximately around 263 or so to make up the total of 298. So you can see there's a significantly higher amount of trees being replaced and put in than even required under the ordinances and the mitigation in the specific plan. Here's some example of trees that are in the nursery as we speak. You can drive behind or don't go all the way in, but drive behind the Cinemark area there. And if you go behind the theater and the brick building, you can see these out there. And this is a shadow of a person, but this is a real person here. And you can see some of these trees are fairly significant. These are existing in the background, but in the foreground, these are all new trees that are being planted and will be watered and cared for before transplanting. This is the nursery site from an aerial, and the theater is on your right, the highway's on your left, the VA to your south here. And you can see these trees being planted here. And this will be completely filled up as we go forward with 50 or more of the transplanted trees. These are the trees along First Avenue that are to be preserved, and these are some of the big ones. Mr. Owen talked about these along First Avenue. You can see they're being protected with orange, but they're also during current activity out there, but they're obviously, the plan is to protect these moving forward as part of the land plan and the development plan. And these are, large cypress as we go through. They're nice trees. Just another example here, a little bit farther down, you can see some other trees as we go along First Avenue from north to south. So the phase 3 tree permit versus phase 2 west, the phase 3 tree permit, again, this is a map that was out of the arborist report. But overall, there's about 341 trees that need to be that are removed, 299 healthy trees in the good or fair condition that need subject of mitigation that will be removed, that will then be replaced according to the ordinances. 7 previously removed, unfortunately, and so those actually have a penalty associated with them. So when you do the arithmetic, you have about 640 trees total of the mitigation requirement. 2 to 1 of a 299 gets you to 598 mitigation trees. Add that on top is 42 penalty trees, 7 times 6, 42 penalty trees, a total of 640. However, in our improvement plans, which are currently being prepared, we don't have those yet, but in the improvement planning, we anticipate around 1,691 total trees to be put into the phase 3 area and tentative map area. And that includes saving 117 in place. And those are in the green here, not only along 3rd Avenue, 1st Avenue, some over in this corner, but also all of those trees that you see along the highway here that are in the Opportunity 3 area and the business park are going to be saved all along here. So everything within the lines of the tentative map application and will be saved along here. You'll have a variety of trees inside this future office park area as well. We don't have a site plan currently, so we don't know exactly if all of the trees here will be preserved or just some of them in this specific area. A lot more transplantings too that will then go up into 24 transplantings actually that will go up into the nursery and then be distributed back. And then so new plantings estimating again around the 4.8 to 1 ratio. If you add those to the others, you get around 1,550 of those. You'd add them together, you get to 1,691. So quite a significant effort to replace trees back into the phase 3 tentative map area. Don, did you want to add anything here?
No, you did a good job, Doug.
All right, thanks. So here is some pictures of 3rd Street trees preserved. And this is looking, I believe, west up the hill, up 3rd Street. This is the circle area. This is 1st Avenue on the left, and 2nd Avenue on the right. This is the future city park area, but this is the business park area. So it's on the edge of the residential up here in the business park area. The county's operations or the county supervisor's office is in this area there. So if you look up, you can see some large trees that were being preserved along this 3rd Street. Here's another view of them as well. I think this is from the other direction, 1st Avenue looking that way, looking east, excuse me. And there's some trees down here in this area that are anticipated preserved. Of course, the buildings we're not preserving. It's our intent to remove these buildings as quickly as we can once approvals have been provided for the tree removal, so we know which trees exactly to protect and preserve, and we have our phase 3 tentative map. Then we can begin building removal. There has been activity already in prepping them for removal, but the actual physical removal of the buildings we've all been waiting for is dependent on the phase 3 tentative map approval and the tree removal permit approval. So everyone loves this slide. If there are any questions, we are available for questions. And thank you again, Chair Amadeo and commissioners, for the opportunity to make a presentation tonight on this important component of the Dunes project.
Thank you, Mr. Yant and Mr. Hofer. And what I'm going to do is because we did open the public hearing, I'm going to let the public ask questions. And then when it comes time to answer those questions, if you can be prepared to help us out, that would be wonderful. Okay.
Yes, we would.
All right, thank you. So we have one other member of the public who got their hand raised, Lisbeth Fisher. So Lisbeth, you are able to talk now.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Amadeo. And good evening, everyone. I am Lisbeth Visser. I am one of the concerned citizens that are mentioned in the staff report. And as discussed last March, our group discovered that 7 large Monterey cypress trees had been removed without a permit. And we were more than a little bit upset. We were pretty shocked. But I would like to thank city staff and Marina community partners for the way that this unfortunate incident has been handled. During the special meeting on May 2nd, the developer offered apologies, informed us that additional trees will be retained, and invited us to a site tour. And a special meeting, public meeting was held, plus a community meeting, followed by that site tour. It was good to walk in that area together with the developer and to actually see and discuss the trees. The developer really reached out to us and then submitted a proposal to modify the tree removal permits. I think that they are going above and beyond by retaining several Monterey cypress trees for which they already had received a removal permit, and by relocating at least 50 of those saplings and small trees that otherwise would have been destroyed. And I personally, and I'm especially grateful for the adjustments that will be made to retain tree number 1353, which is also known as the drone tree. Since work will need to be conducted very close to this tree's roots, it might not survive, but at least the tree now will have a chance to live another couple of decades, hopefully. I am rooting for this tree, plus for all the other trees that will be retained or relocated. I support the resolution, and I hope that the next phases at the dunes will move forward, including removal of barracks. I would like to thank all of you, and also Mr. Mike Owen, for all that you're doing for our city. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking to see if there's anybody else. And I don't see anybody else on this raising their hand. So I'm going to close the public hearing and we will come back. There was one question I would say from Mike Owen regarding a particular type of cypress that was being saved and he thought it should come down. So could you address the tree or trees he was talking about? And I guess, Doug, that's to you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll defer to Don on this one. Don, do you want to handle this?
Sure. I'm kind of frantically going through the tree report right now. You know, our tree report includes photos of all these trees. And so we'll see how good I am. But as I'm going through it, I believe Mike is referring to tree, let's see, tree 951 or 967. Those are the two cypress trees that are within the linear park that we have proposed to retain. And so I'm not able to put my finger on the specific photo of it right now, but you know, I guess we're willing to work with Mike on that. And you know, I guess if the idea is that it's not recommended to retain, you know, we can always make that adjustment. Either way, I mean, listen, we're willing to do what's right, and so we'll kind of go from there. I don't know, you know, we don't have our Patrick Krabacher from Denise Duffy and Associates as our arborist. He's not on the call tonight or in the meeting tonight. I know the city's arborist, Mr. Ono, is on. I don't know if he might have comments on this tree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hofer. And then so, Mr. Ono, if you have something that you can add to that?
I really don't know what to say about that. That's in a linear park, and Michael's question was that it has so many lower limbs that were removed that I don't know if they're properly removed or not. It seems to me that that would be something that it'd have to be studied further to whether or not it could be pruned safely, and that way you could retain the tree.
Yeah.
But if it's truly a hazard, wouldn't it fall under an additional or a tree removal permit, a tree replacement type of thing? Because what we did was we went out and we walked through the entire project, looking at trees that would be candidates for retention.
Dit kort te maken, morgen maar 2 minuten.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, evidently, Lisbeth, be sure her mic was still on, but it is now off. So go ahead.
But anyway, what we did was we went through the entire list of trees, looking to see which ones were retainable, which ones weren't. Looking specifically for trees that could be additional trees that could be retained. When it comes to individual trees like that, as you come up at, this is a case-by-case basis. It's a matter of tree count. You would retain the tree, and if it's really in that bad a shape, then you could supplement it by calling it a hazard and taking it out as a hazardous tree. That's how I would approach it. But still, for to balance out your numbers, it's still a tree that's retained, because you're basically looking at a spreadsheet of trees. And if you have 1 or 2 trees that look like that they're not going to be safe, well, you would, as the project goes on, then that'll start coming to the surface.
So I want clarification just to make sure. If I'm not quite sure I understand, then we may have other commissioners or members of the public that don't understand.
Okay.
That we could approve it as is, the tree removal permit, the tentative map, et cetera. We could approve that as recommended by staff. But as you go through developing the project, if it was deemed that those were a hazard, they don't have to come back and get another tree removal permit. Those 2 trees could be removed because they would be a hazard. Am I understanding that correctly? Or would you have to come back again and get another permit?
Well, that would be my approach. Because if it's here's the truth of the matter, that as you try to save trees and as you're building and you're grading, there's going to be some unexpected situations that come up where all of a sudden you're going to have an emergency tree removal permit. So that's how you approach that. You say, these are the trees you're going to retain, but supposedly as you're grading and you're cutting subsurface roots, all of a sudden that tree starts to shift, or you have inclement weather. You have to have some leeway in being able to grant an emergency permit. And that's how you would approach that, rather than say, well, we should take it out now. If it's something that could be handled by pruning, well, you just prune it up to keep it safe for now, and you don't have to remove it.
Thank you. I appreciate your input on this. It's much easier to deal with it all at once rather than continuing with commissioner questions when we needed clarification on that issue. So I really appreciate it.
Sure.
So now, commissioners, do you have any questions of the Marina Community Partner members that are here? And if not, you can raise your hand for discussion.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Woodson did ask a question about the SB 330 protections.
I'm sorry, I did forget that. Yes.
So I can answer.
Go
that.
ahead.
Thanks. So I think, one of the things to note is that this application has been pending with the city now for over a year. It was originally submitted in September of 2021. And there was, some back and forth with staff as we discussed in the staff report and in our presentation. But, the project has been significantly delayed. And as a result of the amount of time it's taken to get it to this point. And you can tell a lot of hard work's been done. The project goes all the way back to 2005, and Doug was there. He can tell you there was something like 42 public meetings to, where a lot of this was hashed out. And I know Chair Amadeo, you were there also. And so a lot of this was done previously in terms of, as an example, the tentative map that's before you tonight, the details associated with the street layouts and how that would all work was hashed out at that time. And so it's in the specific plan. A lot of this has been done. And so as a backstop, we brought in the SB 330 protections. We're in a position right now where if you've been out to the site, there's been a lot of cleanup work that's been done. We've been preparing to begin building deconstruction, which originally was scheduled to start several months ago, but we can't start building deconstruction until we have an approved tentative map and tree removal permit. And we're virtually at the point right now, guys, where we're getting ready to lay off, potentially have to lay off crews because we're just running out of work because of where we're at in the project. And so it was sort of a backstop, and I'll be honest with you, Mr. Woodson and members of the Planning Commission, we're hoping that this can go fairly expeditiously. And, so as a way of hoping that will happen, SB 330 was designed for this kind of situation, and we thought it was appropriate to invoke it. So I can answer more questions. It's not intended to be, anything but a good partner with the city, like we've always tried to be.
Thank you, Mr. Hofer. Okay, so commissioners, do you have any questions of staff or Marina Community Partners or Mr. Ono, the arborist? Wow, there are no questions. I'm actually amazed. So if that's the case, then I would entertain a motion. And I really need somebody to make a motion.
Well, in fact, I saw Mr. Yount raising his hand, and maybe he was trying to make a comment.
No, thank you, Commissioner. I was just,
No.
I just wanted to make sure that Mr. Woodson's question was answered.
No, I mean, I'll respond and then I will I can make the motion also, Chair.
Okay.
So it does answer my question. I am, to be honest, a little bit frustrated by it because I do think over the last 2 years, this commission itself has not created a delay at any time on any of the phases moving forward. I can't speak to what happened over more than 2 years ago, but I can go back and I'm looking, I've got all the agendas open over the last year and for the discussions, and there has not been an issue where we have really held up pretty much anything unless there's been a violation such as happened with the tree removals up on Windy Hill, where that was an issue. So I've raised a question because I was frustrated because I don't think that this has been an issue that we and necessarily the city council either at this point have been holding up. I think we've been very supportive of it. With that said, I do make a motion and I can't pull the file up. It just won't open on my computer right now, probably because it's a doc file and not a Google file, just for at work. Let's see, where is it? So my motion, thank you, is I would make a motion to approve the tree removal permit and recommendations that the city council determine that was proposed tentative map amendments consistent with the certified EIR and adopted University Village plan and approved an amendment to the tentative subdivision originally approved in 2005 With the additional information requested with the applicant on tree 951, identified by Mike Owen. And then I would also add to the end of that, and approve through discussions with the Marina City Planning on September 8th, 2022, which would then cover the discussions that your office had today with them.
Oh, great. Oh,
And the main reason I added that is because I do believe that because those were just discussed today and just posted, that way it syncs to what was just posted online, since it didn't match what was officially in the agenda that we released.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Woodson. Do we have a second?
I second.
A second by Commissioner Herr. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
sure. Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCarthy,
Yes.
Commissioner Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodson,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr,
Yes.
Commissioner St. John. Commissioner St. John. See if he's, I don't,
Is he muted?
Saying yes. Yeah, he seems to be having the issue that he had earlier.
okay. Well, the motion passes, Madam Chair. So,
Okay, thank you. And it was unanimous. So let's move on to the action item.
well, Madam Chair, just for, for procedural, I did not hear Commissioner St. John, so I'm going to put him as abstain just for fairness purposes. So,
Yeah, it's interesting because he is on his phone. So I'm
Right.
wondering if he is muted through us.
he is not shown. So,
You know what? The phone, he's listed
Oh.
as an attendee. If you can, I will unmute him.
sure.
Oh,
If-
no.
In fact, he's using his mouse lips. He was saying yes earlier.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, yes.
Thank
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. So now we will move on to the action item, to conduct a study session with the Planning Commission regarding the adoption of an affordable housing overlay. No formal action will be taken. Input and direction from the Planning Commission be provided to the staff. So I don't know that the Planning Commission has ever had something where they're not going to make a motion, but during our discussion, you are making recommendations to staff about how to move forward. And this is presented by the Community Development Director. So Guido, it's all
Yes.
yours.
Let me promote Nikki. She's from Rincon Consulting.
Okay,
Let me see if she's. Yes, she's
yes,
just.
there we go.
You there, Nikki? All right. We're really fortunate. We were able to hire Rincon to help us with our downtown plan, as well as this overlay. And so without further ado, I'm gonna pass it off to Nikki. And I do have your PowerPoint, Nikki, so.
Great, yeah. While Guido brings that up, good evening, Chair Amadeo and members of the commission. As Guido mentioned, my name is Nikki Strigan. I'm a senior planner with Rincon Consultants, and we have been working closely with city staff on the development of the affordable housing overlay.
It's
So,
having a little bit of trouble, but 1 second.
taking its time, okay.
And I will tell you, I just muted Commissioner St. John because I think we were getting some feedback off of his phone as well.
Got it.
Great. Well, I'll first begin by, and so what we're going to do is we're going to walk through, what an affordable housing overlay is, why the city is proposing an overlay, And we'll go through some of the key components, and look at maybe some of the potential resulting type of development that could be created from the overlay. So I'll start with the next slide, please. And I'll first begin, of course, by defining what an overlay is. It's a tool that that's used within the zoning code. And in this sense, we're using it to create a greater supply of affordable housing. Effectively, the overlay sets an additional set of regulations that a property owner can exercise. It's optional. So while some of these property owners may have, commercial, industrial, or residential multifamily underlying zone districts, the overlay is just an added benefit to that, or an optional benefit to that. Similarly to regular zoning, the overlay provides a list of standards. I like to think of those as sort of check boxes that you have to meet certain setbacks, height requirements, and parking ratios and parking standards. And then it also sets forth design standards to shape the form and the look of the building. So those are stated in the code, and we'll talk a little bit more about those in just a moment. So why is the city proposing an affordable housing overlay? By and large, it's to come into compliance or be in compliance with its housing goals. And these are past housing goals, believe it or not, that the city is trying to come into compliance with. They're derived from something called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, which I think your commission is probably familiar with. And those are goals that are created, they're identified by the state, but they're created in order to ensure that cities and counties create capacity for housing at a variety of different income levels. So housing for all incomes is really one of the goals. Well, the city had not met sort of on its promise to meet some of those goals from past housing element cycles. And by and large, those were promised through the adoption of a downtown specific plan, which really hasn't come into fruition. And the city then needed to identify another regulatory mechanism to comply with housing requirements and meet those goals. Next slide, please. We are seeing housing overlays throughout the state of California. We see them applied in other ways too. There can be downtown overlays, mixed use overlays, senior housing overlays. Sometimes we see them tied to more in an environmental fashion to flood areas and the like, but we see housing overlays in order to meet some of these regional housing needs allocations and these housing goals. And the list on the screen is a list of some cities that have been using them around the state. Some of the benefits, next slide, please. Some of the benefits of an overlay is that it enables the city to achieve compliance to meet its housing goals. I think that's kind of one of the first and foremost, not only benefits, but objectives here. It offers flexibility to developers and property owners. And to the extent that it supports streamlining development, there's a sense of predictability that's also created when using these overlays. And then, I think when we ran some or did some community outreach meetings earlier in the week, it gave property owners some, they were glad to hear it wasn't a requirement, that it is an option, right? It's in addition to what their base zone district is. Next slide, please. So here are some of the key components of the overlay, and we're going to talk a little bit more in depth about these, but the way that it is structured now, it's proposed on 23 specific sites within the downtown plan area. The proposed ranges in density are greater than what the base zone districts are, and they range from 30 to 50 dwelling units per acre. In order to use the overlay, the applicant has to have a certain percentage of affordable housing units. So either 12% of the units have to be designated for very low income, or 15% have to be designated for low income. Like I mentioned, there's a series of development standards separate from the underlying zone district. It's got its own set of objective design standards to shape the form and aesthetics of the building. And then some of the key incentives that we'll be talking about, one is development streamlining. So the applicant doesn't have to come in for a use permit. The approval of this overlay and its subsequent environmental document afford streamlining through a ministerial process. And then there's some financial incentives, and we'll take a look at some of those also later in the presentation. So here is a look at the sites that were selected. You can see again, they're all within the downtown area and highlighted in blue. And as I mentioned, there are 23 total. Some, of course, are along Reservation Road and Del Monte Boulevard. And then there's some sites that are within the interior of the downtown. And by and large, these were selected because some of these sites are vacant. Not all of them are vacant, but the ones that aren't vacant are considered underutilized. So there may be a low low use of the site, or a low percentage of the site is used, or low FAR of the existing structure on the site. And the size of the site mattered too. So they range from just under 1/4 of an acre to just over 4 acres. That was something that was evaluated. Next slide, please. So we'll take a look at a few development standards. Again, I had mentioned density is probably the key one here, because the state, of course, is looking for housing at a certain density in order to accommodate lower income housing. And so the range here is between 30 and 50. The range along Reservation Road and Del Monte Boulevard is a little higher because it was envisioned in the downtown, to see, greater intensity and activity within those corridors. And I should mention too, many of these standards are borrowed from or replicated from some of the downtown vitalization specific plans. So we looked to that plan, that vision for the downtown, and pulled some of them forward into this overlay in order to, bring some of those standards to life in the near term. So the density standards are consistent there. The max site coverage, that's, typically you see that represented as a percentage of the site that can be covered by a structure. There's no requirement here. The setbacks, which are a little more lenient from typical setbacks in the Marina City Code, are presented here on the screen. They do align, again, as I mentioned, with the downtown vitalization specific plan. Heights are a departure from, typically what you see in the zoning code, with 42 feet proposed as a max, with the exception of higher heights along Reservation Road and Del Monte Boulevard, which could be up to 48 feet. So those structures are in the realm of 3 stories to 4 stories, and we'll take a look at some examples that can help to depict that in a couple of slides. And then you can see, obviously, there's open space requirements and so forth. This next slide looks at an important standard, a standard that we've heard is important to a lot of the community members, and that's the parking standard. So this slide shows the number of bedrooms on the left-hand side, the base parking standard as it is written in the existing zoning code, and then the deviation or departure from that that's proposed in the overlay. So for studios, there's an equivalent standard is proposed, but for 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, a reduction in standard is actually proposed. So instead of 2 spaces per dwelling unit, we see 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. And that in part is because around the state, we're seeing, the costs to the development of parking as prohibitive to some multifamily development and residential development. not only because of the cost, but in some sense the sort of space that it takes up. And that comes certainly with the discussion related to, a comprehensive look at how alternative modes of transportation that don't otherwise need a car and therefore a parking space, what that looks like. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And I imagine that there will be some discussion on it. But before you see those standards. And then the next slide shows some of the objective design standards that are proposed. And so, of course, these I mentioned are really targeted at the form and shape of the building, how the building relates to other structures that it's adjacent to, how it relates to the street, and truly the aesthetics of the building, which we understand in the context of a downtown area is important. You want to have an aesthetic downtown. You want to make sure your buildings are pleasing and frankly beautiful to look at. So some of these are borrowed again from the downtown vitalization specific plan and would apply here in the overlay. I had mentioned that there are some financial incentives that the city can commit to. The first here is a waiver, reduction, or deferment of plan check or construction permit fees. The second and third financial incentives have to do with either deferring payment of impact fees, so those are things like traffic fees and the like. So either deferring them or paying them over a longer period of time, which could make it more feasible financially for a developer to pay for the cost of development. The next 4 slides we're going to look at are examples of development at the densities that are being proposed in the overlay. And these are provided in order to give you a sense for the scale and the feel of development at these densities. So these first 2 show projects at 30 dwelling units per acre. You can see that this is a lot that's just under 3 acres. It has 20 units. And you can see it's 3 stories high. The location of the parking on this particular project, there's some surface parking, but there's also some parking tucked under on that first floor. But again, you can get a sense for that scale and feel of 30 dwelling units per acre on a 3/4 acre lot. The next example is also 30 dwelling units per acre. It's on a much larger lot, a 1.25 acre lot, and this is a 36 unit project. Again, 3 stories high, no parking along the, tucked to under the building, but on the surface rather. And so I imagine because the lot size was so large, they were able to, use a lot of that surface area for parking. But again, a sense for the scale of 30 dwelling unit per acre project here. And then this next project is 50 dwelling units per acre on almost a 1 acre lot. This project has 40 units and 3 stories high, and some parking likely in like the back area, but also probably some reduction in parking standards approved as part of this project. And then this last example that we have is also 50 dwelling units per acre. This is a much smaller lot. It's 0.36 acre lot with 19 units, just a 2-story building, but again gives you a sense for the scale of 50 dwelling units per acre on a smaller lot. I want to speak a little bit to the relationship to the overlay, between the overlay and the downtown vitalization specific plan. Our firm had learned that this process had been going on for quite some time, and that there'd been a lot of community input on components of the plan. I mentioned the overlay fulfills some of the intent behind the DVSP, namely the intent to bring more residential uses into the downtown, which was, the vision there was to create more activity, more vibrancy, et cetera. And one way to do that is by bringing people to a place or bringing residential uses to a place. And so to that extent, or to that end, the overlay fulfills some of that intent. I had mentioned that components of the DVSP, like some of the design standards and of course the density, align with some of that future vision. And I think it's worth mentioning too, and I've heard Guido say this a number of times, they are intent on completing that document as well, but it is a separate project, separate process. But the thought here is that the overlay sort of fixes the near-term problem of coming into compliance with some of the housing goals, and also carries forward that sort of some of the spirit of the downtown vitalization plan as far as bringing residential uses at the scale and look and feel as was envisioned in that plan. So I think from here I'll kick it over to you, Guido. Do you want to touch on this slide, or did you okay, I'll pass it over to you then.
Yeah, so I mean, the gist of this basically is the city is out of compliance with the housing element. They have significantly given the state of California, specifically 2 different departments, the Attorney General's office, as well as state HCD, a lot of authority. We are not considered a high resource city. So those are the ones they're mostly going after, but also for cities who are kind of willfully not trying to be in compliance, they're also on the state's kind of radar. So we're trying to stay on the good list for the state, for our housing element, getting this overlay policy adopted by January, if the council and the planning commission approve it, will get us compliance for the 4th and 5th cycle, which are the last 2 cycles. And not to confuse things, but we are kicking off the 6th cycle housing element, which has to be done by December 2023. So really what I'm trying to do is help Marina get whole for the last 2 cycles. And then also what's listed on the screen, all of these are factual. If the city does not seek compliance in a timely fashion, we've actually already lost out on safe routes to school funds, active transportation funds. There are certain grants from HCD that we are ineligible for. You guys probably heard the LEAP grant. That was a state grant. You can't apply for that grant unless you have a housing element that's certified. So there's that. And we mentioned the potential sanctions from the Attorney General's office. And then the most draconian, which obviously we don't want to get anywhere near, is your community development department could get put in some type of receivership, and the state would actually, you couldn't issue any building permits, any real development permits. Everything would have to get approved. So we don't want to lose local control. We don't want to have all these bad things happen to Marina. So this is a mechanism to stay compliant. So we can fix this, and then immediately Nikki's firm has been hired to help us clean up the downtown plan. And so that's really the goal. Let's get compliance, pivot to the downtown plan, get that souped up and approved, and then we're good to go. So that's the bad part of the presentation. Bad stuff that can happen. Did you want to speak to this thing, or I can?
Yeah, I can start and you can fill in some blanks here. Yeah. So Guido held the city held 2 community meetings earlier this week, one with property owners on Tuesday night and one with the business owners in the downtown area on, when I say property owners, I mean, Guido's office sent letters to every site, every property owner whose site is proposed as part of the overlay. So that's who was invited on Tuesday evening, and then yesterday afternoon, the downtown business owners were invited to a meeting. So at our property owner meeting on Tuesday evening, there were a few comments. One was pertaining to, the city's role in the physical development of some of the properties. I think the question was, when is the city going to be developing these properties? And so we made it very clear that that's not really the city's job. The city's job is to create capacity for development. It is not to actually conduct development. And so the overlay does that, creates that capacity. Another comment was pertaining to, just clarifying that this is not it's not a requirement. This is an additional option. So again, I had mentioned earlier that the base zone district remains in place, and it's sort of it's an either or situation. That's how the code is actually written. You can adhere to the provisions and regulations in the base zone district, or the provisions in the overlay. And so there was just some confusion over that, which I think we clarified. There was also a question about, additional density. If someone had, proposed a project that also wanted to take advantage of state density bonus law, it would be subject to subsequent environmental review. And the way the code is written now is that the process is administrative. It's ministerial. So if someone wanted to take advantage of that process, they were in conformance with all of the standards, and then on top of that, take advantage of state density bonus law. Again, the action is ministerial. There's not subsequent CEQA review. So there would be no project under CEQA in order to apply. So that was one clarifying component. And at that meeting, no one had voiced concerns for site selection. I want to say there were 6 property owners total at that meeting. Of course, there's more than that with 23 proposed, but there wasn't concern for someone asking to have their site removed and that kind of thing. And then just yesterday afternoon, we met with the downtown business owners. A couple of comments they made. One was pertaining to parking, and that some of the neighborhoods in the downtown are currently impacted by parking, and that this should be addressed by the overlay or any future development coming in under the DVSP. Someone else had also mentioned, there's the lack of affordable housing is having an impact on local businesses and hiring. In order to retain a workforce and retain employees, there has to be affordable housing for them. And so creating capacity for that and the provision of that through the overlay was, of course, a benefit. They had commented. Someone had also commented about considering the transportation needs of a new generation of employees who are willing to bike and walk and take buses to places as opposed to owning a car. And frankly, being able to afford a unit, whether it's a rental or whatever it may be, that maybe it doesn't have as much parking, and you then do have to use alternative modes of transportation. That being aware of those needs and that generation of resident was also raised. The coordination with the MST Surf Fest Rapid Transit Project was also raised. There was comments about a specific property number 20, which is in the most southern corner of the downtown, and the 2nd Street access to that property, and if the 2nd Street extension project would inhibit any kind of development there. And then finally, somebody had actually asked, can we add another site to the overlay? That was it was kind of an interesting comment, and Guido gave double thumbs up on that as far as wanting to have more sites. Our response to that was, as we analyze the overlay as far as its environmental impacts, we obviously want to make sure that those sites are identified, selected, and included in that environmental analysis as soon as possible. So he'll be obviously working with the commenter on that. You want to take this one, Guido?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, so basically what we're doing tonight is just continuing the targeted outreach. You are a stakeholder of the Planning Commission. We met with the community, as Nikki indicated. And then, yeah, we were super jazzed that somebody heard from the downtown and were wanting to actually say, hey, actually, I want to add my property to the list. So if we get that additional site, then we will add it to the inventory. Next up is we have to do some CEQA analysis with a 30-day comment period. And then we will be back before the commission December 8th. But right now we're really here to listen to the commission, take input as we're crafting the policy. So that when we come back, we can say we heard you and we changed it or modified however the commission wants. So we're really here to listen at this point. So
Okay. So commissioners, oh, we've got a hand raised. Okay, first Vice Chair McCarthy and then Commissioner Walton.
Thank you, Chair Amadeo. I have quite a few questions, so I'll just try to take a couple and let someone else have an opportunity. First question is, in regards to design standards, I know last night the City Council approved an RFP for design standards. Is this what we're talking about here, or is this something separate than what was approved last night?
this is totally separate. This is the overlay policy.
Okay.
But to answer your question, Vice Chair McCarthy, within this policy, we are adding some very clear objective standards because the objective standards won't be done until July or August, and we're trying to get this policy adopted by December, January. So we're trying to protect the community by adding some at least minimal standards in terms of privacy and whatnot. So for lack of a technical term, so we don't get ugly buildings. But yeah, that's the answer to your question.
Okay. And next question maybe is for Rincon. But who chooses the sites? And in your experience, is there any reason why a site may not want to be on the list? Have you, in other words, in cities, have you experienced situations where the city has said, no, that needs to be removed because X, Y, and Z?
That's a great question. So I had mentioned some of the criteria that we use to choose sites. To some extent, we're using some of the criteria that the Department of Housing and Community Development has put forth for housing element sites, right? As part of a sites inventory process, we actually use that criteria because when, if the overlay is approved on these sites, you can actually reuse them for your 6 cycle housing elements. So there's sort of a pre-zoning effort being made here, which is good because if you don't otherwise do this, the new RENA numbers are going to get added on top or carried over into your 6th cycle. So the overlay is the fix for your 4th and 5th cycles, as Guido had mentioned. They fulfill the units that the city had promised to create capacity for from its previous housing cycle, housing elements. So we used vacant sites, underutilized sites, so sites that had a low land value ratio, sites that were had low FARs or buildings that didn't take up a lot of the site, maybe was, as I mentioned, underutilized. We looked at the size of the sites, and these are all kind of parts of the criteria that we use in a typical sort of site selection process. And then what we did is we vetted it with city staff who, based on their understanding of the area, if there were additions or subtractions or whatever it may be. But of course, this is also part of the public process, ensuring that the property owners have a say, that the public has a say if they feel that there are more appropriate sites, or if your commission feels that there might be more appropriate sites.
Thank you. So just the last part of that question. So if I'm a property owner, I mean, there's almost no reason why I wouldn't want to be included in the overlay, right? I mean, it provides me more flexibility. There's no downside for me as a property owner. Is that fair to say?
I think if flexibility and another option to develop your property is top of mind for you, then correct. I mean, you have the provisions of your base zone district in place, or you can take advantage of the ones in the overlay.
Thank you so much. That's it from me for now, Chair.
Okay, Commissioner Walton.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you.
It's
Nikki.
Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki Street. I'm hoping I say this right. Strigan.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. I don't know. I have just a couple of questions. I think I might be understanding this is specific to the downtown area, and it doesn't include all of Marina. So like Preston Park, the Dunes areas, all of that. Just this is specific to what's on the map now. Will those areas be added to? Will those areas have affordable housing overlays added in the future? I hope you understand my question.
Yeah, I would. My answer to that is right now, no. It's just these 23 sites in the downtown area, and at some other point in the future, the city has this tool and they could apply it outside of the downtown. But this project
is specific to the downtown.
It's specific to the downtown.
Okay, thank you. That was my clarifying question. And then with respect to parking, you showed some examples. Do you have an idea of what the people living in those areas right now, how their experiences with parking, what if there are problems with the mitigation efforts were to solve for that kind of stuff, do you know? Or is there, what are the plans for parking if it's that low with respect to rooms to parking spots?
Yeah, if every the context does matter, right? It matters what other modes and services and infrastructure is available. And what I mean by that is, are there bike lanes? Are there adequate sidewalks? Is there adequate transit with frequency enough to service residents going to job centers, or so it does depend on a lot of those things. And I think that conversation to some extent is happening in Marina. Certainly, what we have seen of the downtown vitalization specific plan, there was some vision for that, not a lot of kind of material in that to execute it, but there is a vision for that. And then I'm not as familiar with the the MST SURF bus rapid transit program, but I think if there is a long-term plan for those components, anything to service multimodal transportation and transportation by another mode as opposed to just a car, I think you can put those pieces together and make it work. But it really does depend. Some of those projects were from Santa Barbara, which has pretty robust biking, walking infrastructure and transit, and those pieces I think have to come into play in order to make projects like that work.
Yeah, and Nikki, I just wanted to also add on. So as part of our reaching out to the community, Commissioner Walton, her comment, we did hear that from the community. So when we come back December 8th to the commission, we are doing a very limited parking analysis of the downtown. It's not going to be as robust as the full downtown plan, but we're trying to do at least to get a feel for the capacity and the impacts of the policy. And so that will be part of the commission's review December 8th when we come back. So yes, so it's that plus what Nikki said in terms of the MST. I know Brian in Public Works is working really hard to build some more bike lanes. But if the housing element can get in compliance, then the city is eligible for safe route to school funds, and then those funds can then be turned around to make the community even better for bike bike, and ped, right? So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing first, right? So
Thank you. Yeah, and walkability is so important, I think. For me, as one of the things that I really, really want to see for the city of Marina. Thank you very much for your answers. I appreciate you.
Okay, Commissioner Woodson.
Thanks. I have actually a question from Guido. Is it possible to share my screen for a minute? Because I want to show something that kind of leads to my comments, and my visual screen, I guess, is.
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
It'll only take a minute, and it'll explain my point, and it'll kind of explain my comments.
Okay.
See if this will work. If it doesn't work, just a minute, but all right. So for some context, this is where I grew up in Alexandria, Virginia. And so hopefully you can see the screen right now.
There we go.
Yeah.
You can see it now.
Okay. And so right in the center section right here, this development kind of below Everly Funeral Home, this is a set of townhomes. And some background on that is that we had a extremely large low-income housing area in Old Town Alexandria that had thousands of tenement style kind of 4-story apartments. And the city of Alexandria, and this was literally 40 years ago, in 1982. I'm trying to get the other thing to pull over here. To kind of give you a close-up of what this looks like. Let's see. This is the overhead of that same area with the townhomes. And then this is just kind of a street view off of Kenwood. That's what they look like. And so a combination of townhouses and then 2- and 3-story buildings that have multi units in these. And the reason I show this is, number one, to address the fact that these are 100% Section 8. They were, when they were designed in the mid-'80s, they are still 100% Section 8 homes or townhouses. So the fact is that you can look at this, and if I just showed you this and said, hey, would this something you would like to move into or think of, a lot of people would say, oh yeah, that actually looks pretty good. And so, and you can stop sharing now, or I'll stop sharing. The reason I raise this is that I'm fully supportive of this because I feel like this region, has been so derelict and so behind at getting this on the table. I mean, this is literally something that cities on the East Coast were dealing with and addressing 40 years ago to try to eliminate and provide areas for low-income families. And so it's possible to be done. I would hope that we could do this, and that from a developmental perspective, combining it with the design standards, knowing that we can actually create a set of designs that can be used and implemented pretty quickly across the board. Because that little area I just showed you right there, those two blocks, or there's about 2.5 acres of land, had about 75 homes on them, or townhouses, apartments. But then they probably put in 30 of those around the city of Alexandria, Virginia at the time. I mean, they literally just divided everybody out. And there was a lot of controversy at the time. I remember that. I mean, I was in high school, but I remember it coming up in discussion. At the same time, it has completely integrated into the communities over time. And nowadays, nobody has any idea that those townhouses and people who live there are any different income-wise or eligibility-wise than anybody else. And I think that's a challenge that kind of exists with some of our development right now, is that we have created corridors with some of our apartments around town, and we've almost kind of, oh, well, look, this is kind of where some of our more challenged income-wise live. And we just kind of know that because we have not integrated it across the city. So I would hope that as we move forward and we implement this, that there are not problems, because this is something we should be doing. That's really my comment. I don't have a lot of questions because I was reading through the report. I just think it's way overdue.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and so to answer your larger contextual questions, so not to get too deep into it, but for the 6th cycle housing element, the state's actually asking us to affirm fair housing. You guys have probably heard that term at some of your planning commissioner trainings. And to Commissioner Woodson's point, we actually are being mandated to spread out the affordable housing units throughout the city. What Commissioner Woodson is referring to is some older 60s, late 50s planning where all the affordable housing was stuck in one part, quote unquote, part of the city. And that's really not good planning. It's not good for integrating people and mixing the community. So yeah, this next cycle, we are mandated to, show that we are building housing in all parts of Marina and other cities. And then in terms of the design, absolutely, you as a resident shouldn't know if a project's an affordable project or not. That all projects should have a certain level of standards that the Marina Planning Commission supports. And yeah, to Commissioner Woodson's point, that was also bad planning in the 60s and late 50s to just let certain projects be approved. But yeah, we're being called to a higher threshold as planners to have good design and have good affordable housing at the same time. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. We can ask for both, and that's what we will be doing. So yeah. So those are really good points from Commissioner Woodson.
Commissioner St. John, and make sure that your phone is not muted. Because right now I'm showing it as muted. There you go.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Chair Amadeo. I have just a few questions. How many acres are represented by the 23 sites? Just to get some feel for the size of the ultimate possibility of housing. Then the second, is there any estimate been made for how many of the 23 sites will eventually or actually exercise the option to build the housing? And is there any number of an estimate of Marina's current housing shortage? Anyway,
those are all really great questions. So as an attachment to your report, and also so that Nikki and I, when we send this up to the state, if the council and commission approves it, is we actually have to show the state that this is not just some pie in the sky, something that Guido did on the back of a napkin. We actually have to show them, and this is attachment 3 to the report. We actually have to show them legit numbers of the part. And so to answer your first question, it's about 21 acres are involved. That's the first, that's here. And then this spreadsheet really proves to the state that, like I said, this is not just a pie in the sky type thing, that we took what is the anticipated density, what's been the realistic density in the city, how many acres are accounted for, and what's a realistic level of density that can be built. And let me blow this up a little bit so you guys can see it better. And all this is done. You can see this number down here. Housing element, we're trying to show the state that through this policy, we can actually get to these numbers that we're supposed to actually show the capacity for. So these are really good questions from Commissioner St. John. So yeah, and like I said, this is included in your packet if you want to kind of peruse it in more detail. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Guido.
Okay, Commissioner Herr. Oh, you need to unmute.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Nikki, you may have mentioned it earlier when you were presenting, but I was wondering, I mean, there was this talk about, this AHO, affordable housing overlay, brings more flexibility to homeowners. But when you and the city talked with homeowners downtown, because some homeowners do not like to have affordable houses nearby for the fear that their housing prices go down. So was there a concern from the homeowners in that regards? Because I've heard, for example, I've heard my neighbors saying that, when the city tries to impose affordable housing, they were bluntly telling, me, oh, our housing prices could go down, in Sea Haven, for example. So was there that concern? So that's my first question. And the second is, I think Commissioner Walton mentioned it earlier in terms of the reduction of the parking standard. And you mentioned about alternatives, like, biking or walking or, using MST, but those are just tentative plans for now. So is there a way that the city can come up with some kind of analysis as to the estimate of negative consequences for the city and for the people if this gets into effect in terms of the parking and, reduction in parking standard and building affordable housing? And Guido, you mentioned that this agenda will come back to the commission on December 8th. So is there a possibility that we can get some estimates as to the negative consequences and the city's possible response to that?
Yeah, you want me to start, Guido?
Sure, go ahead.
I'll start. Okay, so we did not hear a comment about concern for affordable housing. Keep in mind the overlay actually doesn't require. It's not not 100. There is 100% affordable housing projects. There are those types of projects in the downtown in the city, but this requires a percentage only affordable to certain incomes. So by and large, the developments will actually be a diversity of incomes. That's how it's designed. And then your second, and no, we didn't hear comments about that concern from property owners. Your second question about parking, the resulting, Guido had mentioned there's where he's working with Kimley Horn on a scope of work to do a sort of near-term and then long-term analysis, near-term with the impacts of the overlay, longer term with the build-out assumptions from the DBSP. And I think the result will be, a set of policies and goals and measures for your city that will have some kind of measurable, reduction in trips or, reduction from development by, setting forth not plans for, but, the goal to develop more infrastructure for multimodal transportation or, augment transit service or whatever it may be. But goals and policies are probably the kind of tangible thing that will come out of these efforts. Now, those will translate then to some kind of program, whether capital improvement or other, that your public works department and supplemental funding sources will help put dollars in construction to. But that's kind of the path that we're headed down. Anything to add on to that as far as the parking piece, Guido?
No, but honestly, I've been a planner for 19 years. Parking is always a major issue. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat. I will tell you, I've been the project manager for about 800 affordable units over the years. And just, tangentially, every time I work on an affordable housing project, even 50% or 75% of the units are affordable, end up working with the development community and they do studies. All of these projects are overparked. So I know the real issue is the peak demand. That's the real issue is, certain times of the day it looks like it, but overall, most places are overparked. It's just trying to find that capacity that's appropriate for each city. But that's why we're doing this parking analysis. We're going to do, like I said, a limited one just for this overlay. And then later on for the downtown plan, a more detailed parking study. So, yeah.
Okay, so Commissioner Rana.
Yes, some time ago, we talked about the ADU policy that we are going to allow the ADUs coming up. So with some of these new dwelling units coming up, will that also impact this compliance factor, or they will also be taken into consideration when we talk about the affordable housing?
Absolutely. And as Alec, the contract planner, presented to the commission in June, I believe, he basically from scratch created the web page, a bunch of handouts and forms to streamline the ADU process. That will help us show compliance with the state. And then trying to get those ADUs built quicker. The commission had asked for a report out about the whole pre-approved ADU plans. We're bringing that back to the commission in a couple weeks in terms of the work that Alec's been doing on that. So all of that factors into us showing the state that Marina is trying to be a good regional player. And we're trying to build more ADUs. And yeah, all of that plays a factor into us staying on the nice list for the state. So.
Did you have anything else, Commissioner Rana?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Walton.
Hi, thank you. I just don't, just a quick clarifying question. If you could define overparked, I don't know what that means. And then I guess with respect to the ADUs, I guess 2 quick questions. With respect to the ADUs, I don't know if it's going to come back to us with Alec's report or how it's moving forward, but I would like to know how many homes in Marina would be able to actually fit an ADU on its lot space. If that doesn't make sense the way I'm asking it, I can ask
No,
it
it makes perfect sense. So the first question, so on some of the projects I've worked on, I've had to make applicants do parking studies. And most cities will have parking ratios of 1 to 2 to 2.5 parking spaces per unit, depending on the size of the unit. And invariably, there'll be, I don't know, I'm just making up a number, 150 parking spaces. And throughout the day, half the parking space is used. It's 75% of the parking is used, maybe 80%. So a lot of sites are overparked. So that's that. So the second part is in terms of the ADUs, every single family home is eligible for an ADU. And every multifamily property is eligible to have at least 2 800 square foot ADUs. And 25% of the interior of the multifamily is allowed to have an ADU. So that's significant for any city. The 2020 changes to the ADU laws really opened up ADUs for everybody. So yeah.
Is it okay if I respond or?
Absolutely.
So I don't think that's necessarily my question. I'm asking physically, like with respect to the homes in, I think, Sea Haven. I don't see, when I drive by them, I've never been physically into their backyards, and the front yards seem significantly small. The side yards don't have room to plop an ADU. So I'm asking with respect to people's actual physical, I understand the eligibility, but what I don't understand is the physicality. Like, how does it actually, if there isn't room for the ADU to physically slot into a backyard because the backyard is necessarily too narrow, and we didn't make it so that the ADUs with respect to square footage go up. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Actually, ADUs is not what's on the agenda. And so we're getting into a lot of detail that hasn't been agendized. So I would like to ask Guido if it's appropriate to get into this kind of discussion when what we're really supposed to be talking about is the issue of overlays.
Yeah, I'll answer one, and then Commissioner Walton, if we can agendize it for another. So to answer your question and to the chair's point, it is not on the agenda. So to answer your question, if don't want to get too deep into this, but if your city doesn't allow, your city has to allow an 800 square foot ADU with 4-foot setbacks. So that's we have to. So even if you have a small lot, we still have to. So, but to answer your question, most people are going for 400 or 500 square foot ADUs. But to the chair's point, this isn't on the agenda. So, yeah, we can certainly email maybe Commissioner Walton, then we can put it on for, or the commission can direct us to bring it back at the next meeting or a couple meetings. So, but yeah, sorry about that, Chair. So.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Herr, and you're muted.
Yep, this is purely out of curiosity because when Commissioner Woodson showed this map of Alexandria, Virginia, because we are talking about parking, the city parking building caught my attention. So because we talked about reduction in parking standard, is the city in the worst case scenario, in case the city could be over parked, will there be a possible plan of building possibly a city parking building as one of the approach? Obviously Alexandria is way more crowded than Marina, so I'm assuming.
Let me I need to clarify that a little bit. So the high school there used to be called T.C. Williams High School, and that parking garage, this is how rich the city of Alexandria is. That parking garage actually is the parking garage for the high school. And about 10 years ago, because T.C. Williams was considered partially racist because of issues, they renamed it Alexandria City High School. And so it is called the Alexandria City Parking Garage, but it actually is just the parking garage for the high school. So I just wanted to kind of didn't want you to get kind of a deceptive idea that that's a parking garage for the city. It really is just for high school students. That's something we can't afford here. But let you answer the bigger issues of parking garages, but I just wanted to let you know that that parking garage was actually not what you were thinking it was. Sorry.
Yeah, he answered the question, Commissioner Herb. Parking garages are extremely expensive. And so, if a city does that, like San Francisco or Oakland or San Jose, then, it's usually in a downtown with a huge amount of density, and people pay for access to it, or there's a bond that gets put up, and then individual developers pay into that bond, or there's a community facility district that's created, and then developers pay into that parking district per se. But I don't know if Marina has that kind of cash. So anyway, that's the short answer. So
okay.
Anyway, but just to summarize for the chair and everybody, we are hearing loud and clear that parking is an issue. This is something that Nikki and I are already starting to hear from the community. We will have that limited parking study back December 8th, and we will definitely offline further figure out ways to address that as part of the overall downtown plan and limited for the overlay. So.
Okay. Commissioner Woodson, you have your hand up. Was that for your comment before? Okay. I don't see any other questions from commissioners. I have a question, but I want to see if we have any attendees that wish to speak to this. Yes. So I'm going to open this up to the public. I will hold my question. So Lisbeth Vischer, this is your opportunity.
Thank you very much, Chair Amadeo. And good evening again, everybody. Thank you very much for the presentation. I had just two minor notes. It's not 2nd Street, but it's 2nd Avenue, the extension to Del Monte Boulevard. And at least once in the document, you might want to replace the word complaint with compliant. This is not even my language. But anyway, I like the goal of avoiding ugly buildings, but that's not an objective criterion, and it can be subject to lots of discussion. And parking indeed is an issue. I hope that public transportation will be improved so that residents indeed will have a chance to choose that over using and having to park a car. I like the bicycle parking that will be included at the SURF busway stops. And I wish that this will be offered at all public transportation stops. As you might have noticed earlier tonight when my microphone accidentally was open, and I'm sorry about that, I speak Dutch. I'm from the Netherlands, a country with more bicycles than people. After having moved to the US, I realized how valuable it was to have sufficient bicycle parking and safe bicycle lanes, something that I always took for granted. We used to bike to the bus stop or to the railway station and just go, hop on the public transportation. I hope that we can make it a goal to offer that in Marina, or to at least work on that. And finally, we cannot go back in time, but it is very unfortunate to read that our city has missed out on $3 million in funds. I assume that those ships have sailed, and I'm very glad to hear that it's now being worked on. And I hope that Marina won't miss out on any future potential funds. Thank you all again for all you're doing.
Thank you, Lisbeth.
And I'll mute myself. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and we don't have anyone else in the public who wishes to speak at this point. So I'm going to come back to the commission. My only question was, because this is all based on the downtown vitalization specific plan, the draft, as in terms of picking the overlay spots. I was on that committee, and although there were, and I saw on the street list that there are several side streets where that are part of the overlay, and that was always anticipated to be housing. So that didn't concern me, but along Reservation and Del Monte, in the specific plan, it was supposed to be housing over commercial. So that ground floor would all be consistently, people walk down the street and they may have access to their apartment upstairs, but that the downstairs would be for commercial use, for businesses. And I want to know if with the overlay, that is what is being considered, that you would have buildings that would have multiple use, not a single use of just apartments.
Right, Nikki, I can take some of it. So, so the overlay policy actually, it kicks in if you do 12% low or 15% very low. That can be incorporated into a straight residential project or a mixed use project. Right?
Okay.
As long as it meets the height and the setbacks and all the other, and as Nikki indicated, we're trying to, as best we can, make the policy consistent with the downtown draft policy, partially for sequel reasons, but also so that we can show the community that we're not trying to just blow up all the boxes and start over, but try to honor all that good work and outreach that's been done. And Nikki, if you want to add some additional.
Yeah, no, it's a great comment. Because the overlay isn't, it's residential is what it's promoting, not mixed use. However, I would say, you've got, Guido and his team and our team are going to be working on the downtown vitalization specific plan. So what you would then see in the future is those future zone districts. I believe that's the transition zone, district coming down Reservation, that will slip in as the new base zone district. So a developer could feasibly, do that mixed use or that anticipated mixed use, and or they have this option with the overlay. I mean, there's some options moving forward, I think, and hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, I didn't want to think that was being now eliminated, the ability to have businesses on the ground floor and apartments above. So thank you, I appreciate that. So commissioners, if you have any, I see Commissioner McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. And I probably should have got these comments out earlier instead of just questions. And Nikki, I appreciate your patience here. but I do want to get a couple comments out of the way. And the first one has to do with objective guidelines. I just want to say that as I talk to people in our community, the look and feel and tone and identity of our city is one of the things I hear most often. It just has no consistency, and it's the biggest complaint that I hear time and time again. And I'm really concerned about that the objective guidelines in this plan don't go far enough. And I want to be clear to say that for me, this isn't a NIMBY thing. It's not about trying to prevent certain kinds of development. It's really about really methodically thinking about where we want to go with these guidelines. A good example of this is that we had an affordable housing project last year, and they talked about balconies and whether to use an opaque material or transparent. The cost for the developer, right, is nothing. There's no difference. But the cost to the aesthetics is big because either you see all of the stuff on the balcony or you don't. And I could think of example after example like this. And I would assume of the 500 jurisdictions in the state, there's a big range of what these guidelines look like, from fairly, I don't want to say strict, but, really in detail to a little bit more broad. And so, it's my perspective that I would like to see a little bit more detail in the objective guidelines. And I know that that is going to be something that's probably going to slow this plan down. And that's also not what I want to do. So I don't know where we go from here, but I want to make that comment. The other thing I want to say is kind of the comment was brought up about spreading this out throughout the city. We've gone to districts now, and I live in District 1. And what I'm noticing is a lot of these sites, a majority of them are in District 1. So from my lens, from my perspective, they're not as spread out as maybe somebody who might live in the Dunes or Sea Haven, for example. So I want to make that comment. And then the last comment I want to make, and I know this is going to be maybe a little controversial, but there's one site in particular that stands out to me, and that's Site 20. You mentioned that there were some comments from the public about Site 20. They say timing is everything, and for better or for worse, there was recently released by the city a proposal for another use for this site you may be aware of. I'm concerned about Site 20 for a number of reasons, and I'm not saying that I would like to see it pulled or that I would like to see it definitively placed in the plan, but I think it prevents some unique opportunities because it is an entry to our city. It is very different from all the other sites in that respect. It'll be the first thing that people see as they enter our city from the south. I just think there's a lot of unique aspects about that site that I think need to be considered and discussed. I'm not prepared to have that discussion tonight, other than to say that it's a unique site. There's already a lot of controversy, or some controversy, should I say, regarding that site. And I think some more discussion and some more thought should be placed into that. And I think that sums up my comments. I hope I went through those really quickly, and I appreciate your patience, Chair.
I absolutely. I also agree that site is really important, but I think if our design guidelines are specific enough for the downtown specific plan, vitalization specific plan, that should be addressed. And so maybe Guido, you can speak to that a little bit, how any changes that are made within that specific plan would impact Site 20.
So the larger contextual issue Commissioner Vice Chair brought up was, expressing concern about the standards. Yeah, we will definitely take a look at that. In terms of slowing down, that gets tricky. We are out of compliance as of now. We were out of compliance when I started working for the city almost a year ago. That has pretty serious ramifications for you as a Marina resident. And so, it wouldn't happen immediately, but if the city chooses to not be compliant with the House of it, eventually it loses all local land use control. And then you have no control over anything that's built. And right now, somebody could come walk through the permit center, file an application, and we don't have any objective zoning standards. So I have made that a top priority of my department. And we're trying to fast track that as quickly as possible so that you as a resident and the planning commission have the ability to properly regulate the form and function of a building. And so within the last 9 months of being here, we've kicked off the objective standards. We're going to kick off a general plan update. We're trying to get 4th, 5th, and 6th cycle housing elements compliant. I'm working as hard as I can to give Marina residents and the planning commission the tools it can to get the design and the housing that you guys rightfully deserve. And in a way, as Commissioner McCarthy mentioned, in a way that's respectful of the Marina identity. But I am playing a little bit of catch up here. And so, yeah, we will definitely add as many standards as we can. But like I said, trying to make the city whole. In terms of spreading out the units, yeah, I mean, that might be more of a comment for the 6th cycle housing element, the next cycle, in terms of how we equitably distribute the sites. For this policy, it's focused on the downtown because that's where the original NOP and the EIR for the project was focused on. But definitely, yeah, definitely being mindful of our affirming fair housing mandates. And hopefully that answered the vice chair's questions, or if you have other comments, Vice Chair McCarthy.
Yeah, if I could just follow up real quickly, 2 questions. One is really for Nikki. Is there like a pool of these objective guidelines that we are pulling from? In other words, is there like 5 lists and one's kind of more strict and one's more broad? I mean, how do we come up with these? And then the second question is, once we approve them in the overlay, are they done to perpetuity, or when can they be changed? When can they be modified?
Yeah, this is the comment I was going to kind of add on to yours, Guido. There is a provision written in the overlay in the code. It's actually the very last section. It's titled Design. And the thought here was, in the near term, we sort of select standards that really just look at some basic things, right? Building articulation, privacy was something that we had heard as, like if one of these structures is built and it's 2 stories and it's like looking down on a structure that might be a single story, how do you, or if a 3-story building comes in and there's a 1-story adjacent to the property, how do you step it back to make it relatable? Those are the things we kind of considered. And because this was such a kind of faster near-term project, faster near-term fix, we made sure to write a provision in, and it's the last one. I think it's subsection I that speaks to design, and that when the DVSP does come in, staff will be able to, and that's a much more robust process. The standards in that will be a bit more prescriptive. That staff will have the opportunity to default to the design standards that are in that. That's how we wrote it. In order to kind of quickly bring the city into compliance, we selected some very general standards, knowing that they weren't as, there's some very robust objective design standards that a lot of cities have adopted for multifamily housing. And your city is actually going to be, undergoing that process with a separate RFP process that they have for multifamily housing. But the thought was, okay, this is a near-term fix. We've got this specific plan on the heels of this project. It will go into, a bit more detail on form and aesthetics. And so the provision that was written in was staff can look at those, because we've got, if this timing for this project is, coming back to your commission in December and to city council in January, and then the following year, I think we're working on the schedule with Guido, but the following year is what we're looking at as far as tackling the specific plan. So I mean that's the kind of forward thinking we were doing, as far as knowing like this isn't the most robust and extensive set of objective design standards, but on the heels of this will be your specific plan, which will have many more.
I would like to ask Nikki, you just mentioned the timeline. So are you saying the downtown vitalization specific plan will not come back until 2024? To be
2023 next year is what I had
Okay,
said.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And we do, we have to work on, we have to work on that schedule with Guido's team. There's an EIR that is hitched to that project. The way we had written it, when we originally had proposed on the project was into 2023.
2023. Okay. I was a little nervous because you took us to the end of this year and then into January. And then you said in next year. And I thought you meant next year following January. So I'm glad I asked because that was scary.
No, we're trying to make Marina whole as quickly as possible. Yeah.
That's what I thought. That's why I
Yeah.
was nervous when I heard that. I do have one question regarding the overlay, and I think about it because of lot 20, but it applies to every part. Is my understanding from your presentation is that these lots are what we're giving to the state to say, see, we are working on meeting our standards, but that doesn't require that the owner or developer of that site actually provide any kind of housing on it. Am I understanding that correctly? We're just giving them the opportunity.
Correct. Creating capacity. Think about it as creating capacity for the development. That's your only job as a city, is to create that capacity.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure. Okay, are there any other comments from our commissioners? And I am not seeing any. So I asked staff, do you have enough information at this point, since this is not an item where we make a motion, to be able to move forward comfortably? Okay, that's what I wanted to see. So we will move on. There are no other action items or discussion items, but under commissioner comments and staff information, we do have information from staff. So Guido, would you like to?
Sure. I'm just gonna, Nick actually helped me prepare a memo. I'm just gonna pull it up on the screen.
Okay, that's great.
Probably faster to do it that way. So give me a second. And then Nick was nice enough to follow up on the Commissioner Woodson's Sea Haven stuff. So let me just at least share the memo real quick.
I have the memo up if you want me to share. Oh, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, so Cypress Knolls, Allison and I are working tag teaming on that. The American Planning Association is offering free pro bono technical assistance to the city. We just finished an MOU with them. You guys will get contacted by the APA as well as the city council to interview you about your thoughts and your background about Cypress Knolls. Hampton Inn, supposed to be done by the end of the year. The Starbucks, I drive by that site every day. They were breaking ground end of August. Every time I go by there, seems like they're meeting new milestones. And then Nick was going to do a verbal update on the Sea Haven. So I'll pass that off to him. So,
Guido, I'm actually going to share my screen really quickly just to show the tree in requested. So if you can see my screen, so I emailed Sea Haven and I heard back that the tree requested an update on number 1729. This is a picture of the location of where it used to be along this fence. It's actually been removed already. It was removed before June 1st, 2021, and it was remained in compliance with the EIR and the City of Marina's conditions of approval, both for requiring a bird survey to be conducted. Patrick Kobachar, their arborist, conducted a site visit and confirmed that this was the tree that was removed within the fence line of lot 13. And this is the previous location. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Just to finish that up. So I think the lot you were looking at, Glenn, was actually was a group of trees, a few lots to the north of lot 13, that are still standing, and they do not require removal. So those trees that you were looking at, those are not required to be removed. So those will stay there. So hope that clarifies it for you.
It does. Thank you. That
Perfect.
I think when we had the conversation, we were actually kind of looking at the wrong trees at the time.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So
Happy
guys,
to answer. Yeah, happy to answer any of these kind of questions. You know, Haven or any other of our partners that we work with are happy to provide this insight. So yeah.
Thank you very much. So we will move on to the DRB Tree Committee update, and that would be you, Guido.
Yeah, real quick. So council directed me and the rest of the staff to reform the tree committee. My original recommendation on the DRB was to disband it. They kind of stayed that recommendation until January, February, to get an update about that committee and then the Economic Development Committee as well. But so now we're definitely reforming the tree committee. I emailed Shep a week ago. She is reaching out to the former members of that committee. Mike Owen sent me a couple emails of other people. If there are other people that I should be aware of that I should get personally in contact with me, please forward me their emails and I'll be glad to let them know the recruitment process. I understand from the chair that kind of a unique, I haven't done this in other cities, I guess. The planning commission makes the recommendation to the council about the tree committee. That's my understanding. So I'll get with the chair once we have a group of people and we'll figure out who to make that recommendation to. So
I believe that the tree committee, as a subcommittee of the planning commission, makes their recommendation to the planning commission, and then we pass that on to the city council.
Oh, okay, very good. Okay.
So it's I guess it's a roundabout way of getting there, but because the project all moves forward together, I think that's the way it's been done.
Right.
So
that's the update for now.
So I have a question regarding the tree committee. And I remember what your recommendation was, that in order to meet those 5 meetings requirement for any project that comes forward, that the tree committee would meet with the planning commission. They would make their recommendation to the planning commission at that meeting, that it would be a joint meeting. It did the council, I can't remember, but did the council approve going forward that way? Or is it still 2 separate meetings on different days?
I don't think Marina can really afford to do 2 because of the streamlining. So most of the staff report that Nick's written have not been, actually the first one, the Abdi Healy, that one had a tree, that was a subdivision. So I guess that would have been a good example of a joint meeting where housing's involved. We don't want to take up the rule of 5, 2 meetings for just one thing. So that would probably be a good candidate for having a joint meeting. But then the one that Allison presented to you guys 2 weeks ago, that was just 2 trees at the water district site. So that would be a good one of, hey, maybe we could have a separate meeting for that.
Okay.
Right. So I guess it would kind of depend on what type of
what the project is.
Yeah. But
Okay,
definitely trying to streamline stuff as much as possible. So
right. Okay, thank you very much. So commissioners, do any of you have any comments at this time? I'm not seeing anybody raise their hand. So we are adjourned at 9:09.
Awesome.